Hello everyone, Knowledge Revolution 2.0 presents yet another video, and today we are going to talk about inflation. Inflation is not just an important topic of economic subject, but it affects our day-to-day lives also. Let's see how. 10,000 rupees in 1982 worth only 607 rupees in 2016. And this fall in the value of money is due to inflation. So to understand this, let's understand what is inflation. As per the definition given by the Milton Friedman, a great economist, inflation is the process of a steady and sustained rise in prices. And opposite of that is known as deflation, falling of general level of prices. But most of the time, even the prescribed UPSC books explain disinflation and deflation as synonyms. Rather, these two terms are very different. Disinflation is falling of inflation. It means that when the prices, suppose earlier the price rose from 5 to 10 rupees, now it has increased from 10 to 12. The rise in the prices is slow. So that is falling in the rise in the prices, whereas deflation is falling in the general level of prices. This is the distinction between inflation and disinflation and deflation. Now we know that what is inflation, deflation and disinflation. How it is measured in India? It is seen with the help of consumer price index and wholesale price index. These are the indexes where the prices are stated for a bundle of goods. Why I am saying as a bundle of goods? Because economy is full of goods and services, and you cannot state prices of all the goods and services. So we take a bundle of goods which we think represent the economy in a better way, and the prices of those goods and services are stated in consumer price index and wholesale price index. Now what is the difference between the two? I will come to the components later, but just for the sake of knowing, in very simple words, consumer price index sees the prices that are made at the time, or the prices of retail purchase and sale that consumer is paying. So it sees inflation from the consumer point of view. Whereas WPI records the prices of bulk purchase and sale. So it sees inflation from producer's point of view. This is the difference between CPI and WPI. Rate of inflation is always shown in the percentage terms. Now let's talk about the types of inflation. So first we're going to talk about hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is a sudden increase in the prices, and it is a very short-term phenomena that, as you can see in the graph, it has been shown only for 1984, and after 1985 it has decreased suddenly. So it is a very short-term phenomena and a sudden rise in prices. Creeping inflation. The rise in the inflation, the slow rise in inflation is known as the creeping inflation. If you can see, from 1.7%, if the inflation has risen to 1.9%, then the rise in the inflation is very small, that is 0.2%. So this kind of increase in inflation is known as creeping inflation. Galloping or hopping inflation. Now, hyperinflation and galloping inflation both are used for high inflation. But the basic difference between the two is galloping is a sustained rise. That is, if every year there is a rise of 10% in inflation, then it is known as galloping or hopping. It can be more than 10%. I'm just using 10% as an example. But hyperinflation is a very short-term phenomenon. It is a sudden change in prices. So this is the difference. And in case of hyperinflation, the prices can go up by like 500%, 100%. So it can be a overnight and a monthly phenomena as well, but not in galloping. It is like a overall on an annual basis how much the inflation has increased. If the inflation has increased 10%, 20% or with a very high rate, then it is called galloping inflation. Now other is bottleneck inflation. This kind of inflation or rise in prices are brought about by the structural problems in the sectors. When there are such shortcomings in certain sectors because of which the prices or the supply falls down, or the then it is called bottleneck inflation. Generally, the bottleneck inflation sees bottleneck in three sectors, that is agriculture, budget constraint, and foreign exchange bottleneck. These kind of bottlenecks or shortcomings, they bring changes in the prices, especially a very high rise in the prices. To give you an example, earlier in this year when the tomato prices risen, the reason was not because of anything else but because of the poor infrastructure facility available in India, due to which the supply was not enough to meet the demand, and therefore the prices was rising. Another is headline inflation. Whenever you read headline inflation in papers, it really means the overall inflation in the country. And as compared to that, when we read about the core inflation, it tells you about the inflation in the core sectors, excluding the volatile sections or volatile components of food and fuel. Most of the volatility in prices or the various changes in the prices, the sudden changes in prices are seen in food and fuel components mostly. So when we remove food and fuel components, we see the core inflation that is there in the economy. So this is the relationship between the core and headline inflation. When you deduct food and fuel components from headline, you get core inflation. Now, with consumer price index, these are the components in food, beverages, and tobacco. Miscellaneous. Now, miscellaneous is important because it contributes or it includes all the services as well, which are not included in WPI. Housing, fuel and electricity, clothing, footwear and bedding. Now, base year of CPI has been recently changed to 2012 and it is calculated by CSO, Ministry of Statistics Program implementation on monthly and annually basis. WPI deals with three kinds of goods, that is manufactured, be it metal, chemical or food, primary articles that are food, non-food and mineral, that can be type of anything, and fuel, oil, electricity and coal. Base year of this is 2011-12. Now, base year has been purposely chosen as 2011-12 for wholesale price index to bring it in sync with index of industrial production and GDP base year. Now, the base year for all three things is similar. IIP, WPI and GDP are all similar. 2011-12. It is calculated by Office of Economic Advisor, DIPP, Ministry of Commerce and Industry on weekly and monthly basis. Now, what are the reasons for inflation? Starting with a very simple example, suppose there are 5 apples in the economy that are produced and there are 5 people who demand 5 apples. Each apple demanded by each person. Now, when the taxes that these 5 people were paying has been reduced, it means that they're left with more money now. So they can ask for more things. Now suppose their demand has been converted into apples only. So now each person's demand has increased with 1 apple. Everybody is demanding 2 apples. So the total demand will be 10 apples by 5 people. But the production or the supply is still 5 apples. So how to decide how much or which person will get the apples? The person who will be willing to give the highest price will get the apples. Of course, why would I bear losses by selling it to person who's giving me a low price of that apple? So this, what happens when the demand is more than supply, then demand pulls the prices up, and that is why that kind of inflation is known as demand pull inflation. As we can see in the graph, when 81 aggregate demand has risen from AD0 to AD1, then the prices go up from P0 to P1. Now, what is cost push inflation? Firstly, we see that the inflation or the prices can increase because of the increase in the demand. The other reason that can bring prices high is because of cost. Oil is a basic component that is used in everything. So say that these 5 apples that were produced in the economy were brought from the farm to the market with the help of some truck or some means of transportation which uses oil. Now when the prices of oil has increased, obviously the cost of transportation to bring these 5 apples from farm to the market will also rise. which will what happen, if I am the seller, I don't want to bear a loss. Therefore, this rise in the cost of transportation will be reflected in the increase in the prices of such apples, and I will be demanding a higher price for each apple. So now the prices have increased because of the rise in the cost of the apple or what I am selling. My transportation cost is also reflected in that price, and then the price has increased. So when this kind of inflation is there in the economy, it is known as cost push. The cost is pushing the prices towards the higher level. As you can see in the graph, when aggregate supply has increased from AS0 to AS1, the prices has also increased from P0 to P1. Now, there are some more terminology that is related to inflation. Firstly, inflationary gap, that happens because of the fiscal deficit. This inflationary gap is, say, in this case, the prices rise because of the gap between the expenditure and revenue of the government. That is, when the expenditure is high than the revenue that they are getting, when we are spending more, then this prices will go up, because as we are spending more, it means that there's more money in the economy and people are demanding more, and this is why the prices go up. Deflationary gap, when there's a fiscal surplus, it means when the government revenue is greater than the government expenditure, then it means that the economy is suffering from low money supply, and because of which the pressure on the prices is to decrease. This is called deflationary gap. Inflation tax, it is a penalty of holding money. As I showed you in the second slide, that the value of money decreased. So whoever was holding 10,000 rupees in 1982 is left with the value of money of 607 rupees in 2016. This is kind of a tax that he is paying. So this is a penalty of holding money. Now, seigniorage is not exactly related to inflation, but it is this term is used mostly with inflation. It means the difference between the value of money and cost of producing it. In case of demonetization, when this 2000 note came, so the cost of making or printing this 2000 note and the value of this 2000, that is 2000, so the difference between them is known as seigniorage. Inflation spiral. It is kind of a vicious circle, that when there is a inflation, say price is high, so people are going to demand high wages. Because the prices are high, I am not able to buy things, so I will demand high wages. When the wages go higher, then because I am a labor, I am working in any company or factory, so my wage is counted as a cost of production. So when the wage go high, the price also go higher. So this way, and again when the price again goes high, I demand for more wages. So because of this spiral goes on. So it is called as inflation spiral or wage price spiral. Inflation accounting. When a firm calculates profit after adjusting inflation, it is known as inflation accounting. Inflation premium, bonus to the borrowers due to inflation. Suppose I am a person who borrowed 10,000 rupees in 1982. So what worth of rupee I have to give in 2016? Only 607 worth of rupee. So it is kind of a bonus to me. Stagflation. Stagflation is generally a situation with high unemployment and high inflation. This kind of situation is known as stagflation. Reflation. When government deliberately bring back inflation to reduce unemployment. To explain this, why government want to bring back inflation and how inflation is related to unemployment, let me explain you Phillips curve. The Phillips curve given by A.W. Phillips shows that there exists an inverse relationship between the rate of unemployment and the rate of increase in nominal wages. And as you can see, they say that there is a inverse relationship between unemployment rate and inflation, which says that when we have to decrease unemployment, we have to increase, there will be a rise in the inflation rate. So because of this, when in the reflation is the situation when government deliberately bring back inflation, that is, there's a rise in the inflation because they want to reduce unemployment. So this is what they're talking about. This is the scene that they're talking about. Because of such a relationship between inflation and employment, when government wants to decrease unemployment, they have to rise the inflation rate, and when they do it deliberately, it is known as reflation. So here comes an end to this video. We'll talk about CPI and WPI trend, the current trend of WPI and CPI in the later videos. Keep watching. Thank you.